We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Hello, this is Dylan Moore and Nima Bajor of iRead It TV. It is Monday, August 15th, 2022, and we are here doing it live. And today, we're going to be talking about money and economics and why nobody knows what the hell they're talking about except me and Nima. You came to the right place. Nima, did you know we're the only two people that know what we're talking about? Actually,
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm talking about. Nima does. I just repeat what he says.
No, it's a good way to introduce your beliefs.
Exactly. This is ironclad religious level beliefs.
This has been all economic
fact-checked view of reality.
Fact-checked, right?
Yeah.
And all the opposing views have been debunked. So
exactly. There's no more room for discussion. This is the way the things are. And if you do, it's a settled science. If you question us, you're an economics denier. Well, I think it's a good time to bring this in because we just have an inflation bill passed, which is either an ironic or an unironic name. You can't even tell the difference anymore. And
I think it's just because inflation reduction is popular, so they have a spending bill and they need to name it something, so they name it inflation reduction.
We're going to spend more money and call it inflation reduction, and then I guess we could talk about it a little bit. Had they spent the money on something else, that may have been true.
Well, also they have a tax. I don't know what the net is going to be, but they're raising taxes, or at least they're trying to. So that's certainly going to have some inflation reduction effects. Also going to have a cripple the economy effect. So right. That's the objective.
So I managed to weasel myself in on Grand Theft World Town Hall the other week, and I guess it was something I've been planning for a while. The Grand Theft World are the guys who did Peace Revolution podcast, which was kind of the beginnings of listening to podcasts for me over a decade ago, and is, I guess, ironically, where I started learning about economics to begin with. And
well, it's where I learned about Carol Quigley and the Trivium and history and Manly P. Hall. And,
absolutely. All sorts of stuff.
All that. CIA.
If you haven't checked out Peace Revolution podcast, I don't know what you're doing. It's still good stuff if you go back and listen to it. But I have changed my mind on what I learned about economics there. So I frisked.
Bring some patience. You have to bring some patience with you. You have to listen to 21-hour episodes. But they're amazing and gripping episodes, so it never really bothered me that they were so long.
You just got to treat it like an audiobook. Like, make sure you have like an audiobook app in your phone so you don't lose your place if you try to listen to it on YouTube or something. You're just gonna like try to click and drag and find, okay, I was at 7 hours and 23 minutes and I can't quite seem to scroll and hit use a audiobook app. But anyway, I frisked my way into the Grand Theft World Town Hall to incite some economic violence amongst the participants there. And what are you loading up? Oh yes, Grand Theft World. So I just came in and I talked about the basics of MMT. I didn't even bring up MMT until somebody figured it out halfway through my presentation. However,
well, you've sparked like a big conversation for them because it went on all the way to the end. Even though they were at the end, they were talking about absolutely abstract philosophical concepts and political concepts, but I think it was all sparked by the challenge to the barter theory of money or anarcho-capitalism in general.
Absolutely. Want to switch us back to video there, Nima?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I heard because I was driving when I called in, and my phone died. I was doing an interstate drive and my phone died. And Tony told me. Tony Myers is the guy who's hosting that part of the show. He said that the show kept going for a long time after I fell off, and apparently Nima has gone back and listened to it. But
yeah, and also, yeah, even after you dropped off, they still talked about money and politics and power, and I thought some of the things that they start getting into relate to Carol Quigley's stages of civilization and the institutionalization of instruments, but they never explicitly really talk about it like that. I think they're always very focused on his book Tragedy and Hope, but the evolution of civilization is not so much. But even though I think there's some interesting concepts from that book that we can bring to bear in regards to
absolutely
to that discussion that they were having.
Absolutely. So, but I mean, let's go back to the Inflation Reduction Act. Let's not get into the philosophical clouds and evolution of civilization stuff immediately. Inflation Reduction Act. I don't remember what the spending was on. I'm sure it's all crap. Hire more IRS agents and send more money to Ukraine, more Medicaid money, stuff like that. Combination of more tyranny and some neoliberal tax and spend policies. Oh, I did read, oh yeah, they spent another $750 billion, but they raised the corporate tax rate, so that paid for it, Nima. It's all cool.
Yeah, so that's the question. So what's the net at the end of the day? If it's more spending, then that's not fighting. I mean, if it's more net spending, then it's not fighting inflation. It's higher taxes on the net. Yeah, then maybe. But that doesn't mean it's a good thing.
I think it's worth again asking the question: what is the money being spent on? Right? Because you and I both know if money is spent on something that increases productive capacity, and you have more goods and services available than money that you've spent in, at least in relation to what you had before, then you've got more things to buy, even though you've spent more money, and it can work out. Things can. You're not necessarily going to see a rise in prices, and maybe we need to clarify what inflation means versus what the rise in prices means, or at least I should say what we're referring to when we say inflation.
Yeah, I mean, when I say inflation, I mean an increase in the aggregate price level.
Okay. Because I know some people say it just means an increase in the money supply, which is just a completely useless definition.
You're right. And that's what the Austrians do. That's what they satisfy themselves with, is just to say, well, it's inflation when the money supply rises.
So the money supply rises when the money supply rises? Yes.
Right. But the question is, how is that helpful? And historically, if you look at the increase in the money supply, has it been a helpful indicator? If so, for what? I don't think it has been. I think there's very little correlation between money supply and important outcomes that we're trying to track and predict, such as recessions, booms, deflation, crises, hyperinflation, all these things. They're not necessarily so... they're not necessarily driven by the money supply per se. It's a very theoretical and academic indicator to be obsessing about.
Well, and then, of course, as we've talked about before, a much more important thing to look at is the private sector net savings supply, right? Right.
So that determines whether there's enough for people to spend and expand and invest and pay their debts and pay their taxes at the end of the day.
Right, and then just to reiterate, the private sector net savings is essentially what the government spends into existence as opposed to what the banking system spends into existence, because the banking system has a net zero, right? If you add up the liability of the loan versus the asset of the loan, regardless of what angle that you're looking at it from. So from the bank's perspective, the loan is an asset. From my perspective, the loan is a liability. Asset plus liability, you add them up, they equal zero. If you do this throughout the entire economy. What's that?
The bank deposit, the deposit is a liability to the bank, and it's an asset for you.
Good point. It's like two times two here. So, however, in terms of the government, when they spend money into existence, even if we don't have time to talk about the, in quotes, borrowing that the government does, but for the sake of the private sector, when the government spends money into existence, that's money that's just out there. There's no net liability where if you add up the whole thing, it equals zero. So if you've got all the banking money, that adds up to nothing. But then all the government money, that adds up to a positive amount when you add up the entire assets and liabilities of a macro economy. What'd you pull up here?
This is the Senate Democrats' overview of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Got it. So the key component that we look at as MMTers is what's that private sector net savings, because that is the key indicator of whether that number is going positive or is going negative.
So,
how the economy is going to react.
What we can see here is that it's a deficit reduction bill, according to the Senate Democrats, at least. But so that's interesting, because then, yeah, it is a net restrictive policy in terms of the public or private sector finances. It removes money from the private sector. At least that's what it aims to do. Questions at the end of the day where these are estimates, but it aims to reduce the private sector net savings, essentially. Which is an
Wait. I'm sorry. I just saw this. Prescription drug pricing reform. They're increasing the cost of prescription drugs to raise money for this?
Well, they're not saying... no, they're not saying that they're raising the price. They're saying pricing reform. I don't know...
Well, they're saying pricing reform and that it nets them more money. So...
Well, but they don't sell... The government doesn't sell the drugs, so I suspect that they are taxing the sellers of these drugs or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm sure that won't be passed on to the consumer, so that's good. Oh yeah, and they're spending it on energy security. Okay, bring that back up. Okay. Energy security and climate change or climate action. What did that say?
Yeah, I mean, this is energy security and climate action. These are their investments, right?
Well, and that's the majority of the investment. And a little bit to do with healthcare and a little bit to do with water. Okay.
I mean, it's just grift. That's all it is. It's like this one line item is basically a big grift line items, investments. It's like, where do we distribute the money?
Well, and I guess the way this is being sold with the inflation reduction is to say, hey, we're going to tax more money in. And then because there's still a total deficit reduction, they can say, hey, we achieved it, but we added this thing in here that you don't really notice, which is energy security and climate change, right? Well, what we know about energy security and climate change is what they mean is make it harder to get energy.
Well, yeah, so their thinking is, or they're thinking, I'm just going to call it, I'm just going to assume they think to be charitable to the way they process this stuff. But in their thinking, investing in green energies, renewable energy is going to bring the price of energy down. And so that's fighting inflation, because the main driver of inflation right now is oil prices and energy costs in general.
Right. Oh, and labor.
And that's the story they're going to tell themselves, and they're going to tell each other. But yeah.
Can you flip back to us? Yeah. So, I mean, going back to... Right, I mean, we've talked about this like in very basic, like mythological terms of describing the MMT story, right? Which is you say, okay, here's this thing that comes on as the government. It becomes the public sector. It wants the private sector to do work, so it levies a tax on the private sector. You all owe 10 Nima bucks, and then in order to get those Nima bucks, you have to work for me in the public sector. And let's say that first thing is making a bridge. Right? Okay, everybody come together. I'll pay you these Nima bucks so you can make a bridge. After I've paid you all and you've paid your taxes, there's some money left over that you can start an economy, and the bridge helps you create goods and services within that economy. There's a net benefit, we'll call it in quotes the public good, for that to happen, right? So if the money being spent into existence by the government, if it gets spent on something that helps increase productive capacity, or I should even say productive potential, right? That could be used to create more goods and services, which I would argue is not as inflationary as it could be, right? Whereas if you spend money into existence in order to restrict the flow of energy, right? Like, oh, you can't have as much oil. Oh, we need more regulations on CO2 emissions. We need this. We need that stifles our ability to produce.
Right.
You got a double whammy. You're increasing the money supply and you're decreasing production.
And that's the general attitude I find. I just got back from Europe. I hadn't been there in like 4 years. And the general attitude over there is just one of restriction. It's like a complete 180 from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, where the attitude was just, what can we do? What can we build? What can we expand? And it's just so, like, to me, it's so striking to see nothing. People don't think about solving problems anymore. Everything's just a problem. Everything's a hindrance. And we can't, like, I was staying at my mom's place, and it got hot as balls 2 days. It was like 99 degrees, 95 degrees. And most people don't have ACs there. And my dad was thinking, well, yeah, or my mom was thinking, I think, well, if everyone had an AC, then the power grid couldn't handle it. And I'm just thinking, or I was telling them, but I live in Miami, I live in Florida. Every single household has an AC that runs most of the time. I think.
Night and day, right?
And I pay maybe, I don't know, on average $50 per month electricity. During the milder months, even less. Sometimes the AC doesn't even have to kick in because the community AC from the building is just sufficient to keep the unit cool enough. And I think Florida has like 75% gas power, 12% nuclear, and then a couple of other smaller, maybe hydroelectric, maybe some renewable, some coal. But Germany is struggling now because they are now taking their last nuclear reactors out of operation. That's been a long-term plan after the Fukushima incident.
I remember I was in Austria when that happened. Yeah. Yeah,
and even before that, the Germans, ever since the Chernobyl incident, the general attitude has been, and also with the Red-Green coalition that came into power in 1998, they started just making plans to phase out all nuclear power. And now they're faced with a situation. They have probably a tough winter ahead of them. They don't have the gas supplies they used to have from Russia because they had to play games. They had to play political games with Russia, and to their own detriment, because now they're predicting record high energy prices. On top of that, they're taking their last nuclear reactors off the grid. And now there's a big political debate going on in Germany to put the nuclear back, or to postpone that, taking them off the grid. And even so, there was a survey done, or a poll done. 82% of Germans supported keeping the nuclear power, extending the nuclear, extending the nuclear power phase out, and 42% of those even said, no, we should keep it for good. We should keep it for the long term. We should not phase it out, but we should not just
build more. Yeah,
we should extend it for the long term, etc. So they're going to probably address that, I think, in some manner. The Green Party, for whatever reason, still enjoys very high poll ratings in Germany. So I don't know. In Europe, people are they're very strong with this mental illness of reduction, restriction. The climate is getting too hot. It's because I drove an SUV last year. Shame on me. I'm going to drive a hybrid now. I'm going to stop the climate from changing. They believe that.
I'm just remembering conversations I had while I was in Europe.
Right. And so you see, you see that same attitude reflected in the left in the U.S. in the Democratic Party when they do this kind of stuff. So that's just to circle back on their climate crusade. But from what I understand, also even with this Inflation Reduction Act, this is a corpse of their original climate plans that they were trying to push through.
Right. Well, and I want to keep emphasizing, because this is, and maybe we could blame the Austrians for this, not the like in Austrian, like the economic Austrians, is this hyper focus on the money supply, like you were just bringing up. Which again, I'm not saying that the money supply doesn't affect anything, but when you look at, okay, what are the many causes that could happen for inflation? Well, we just talked about energy prices, huge. We've talked about before of just supply chain fuck ups and just ridiculous COVID restrictions and mandates and stuff. That's like, okay, well, you used to be able to come into this port, but now you have to wait 21 days just for shits and giggles, which adds to everybody's pricing and screws, just whatever. And then I am really
maybe douse it with some disinfectant on top of that,
There's an extra
so spend money on disinfectants.
Labor, and and I am really starting to suspect that a significant portion of the workforce is dying from the COVID shot. So I mean, I just bought a business recently. I don't want to go into too many details about it because I don't want to say what it is on a recorded line. But finding staff is very hard. It's in the healthcare field, and I'm starting to hear stories from the other employees of, luckily, none of my employees so far, but employees that have worked in the past in their 20s dropping dead from a stroke. Where for me, I'm thinking, okay, that employee doesn't work for me anymore, but she was in the industry. Well, that's one more fucking hole in the industry that has to be filled. By who? She's dead.
Right. No,
right? So everybody's got to pay more money to fight over whoever's left.
Yeah.
Well, you look like you're reading something intently.
No. I know we have like dozens and dozens of articles by Stephen Kirsch and written by others about people dying left and
Dropping
right.
like flies,
Young, healthy people who got the COVID shot, who never had heart issues before, are now dying from heart issues. Dropping during workout, during training, or whatever. Athletes the thing is, the reason why we're seeing it with athletes so much is just because it's happening all over the place, and it's never happened before, right? It's never happened before with young people, this kind of stuff,
right?
And now it's all over the place, and even on the field, when all eyes are on the athletes, it's happening. So you got to wonder how much more is it happening
just for everyday people
off screen.
Just for everyday people,
day-to-day people. Right.
Well, and then I mean, going back to inflation, because again, it's the question of how would you fix the inflation? I don't think the Inflation Reduction Act is going to do shit, right? Because if you take $300 billion out of the you're not taking it out of the economy, you're taking it out of the next round of spending, right? That's another play on words that the Congress likes to get off on. But okay, let's say you take $300 billion out of the system. You haven't addressed any of the stuff that I just said.
Right.
Right? Wages are still going to go up if people are dying, if that's the case. And also, I mean, we want to talk about spending, like the COVID unemployment money isn't still available, but there's still a lot of COVID money pouring into public services available. And I suspect, whether that's healthcare or food stamps or whatever.
Reopening guidelines probably also.
Reopening guidelines for.
Well, reopening guidelines are putting restrictions on the business so that they can operate and be open. The grants that were given out to facilitate that reopening under the new Great Reset conditions, right. Basically.
But the other point I wanted to finish was that even if the unemployment money still isn't available, the extra $600 to $300 a week on top of your unemployment money, if there's more government welfare at the lower level being thrown out, there's that much more incentive for people to stay home at the lower rungs instead of go to work. So I'm not trying to make a welfare argument here. I'm just identifying the fact that if you've got the main source of the workforce literally fucking dying, and then another thing sapping off from them to say, oh no, stay at home at work. Here's all this money we're throwing at you. Yes, prices are going to go up because I mean, energy's one thing, but I got to say, labor is the biggest. If your labor goes up, there's no hiding that anywhere. Right? I mean, again, looking at the business I just bought, like 80% of the expenses is labor. Now, not all businesses are like that, but still, and particularly once labor goes up, it's really hard to get it to go back down. I mean, like, let's say with energy prices, okay, oil went up to $120 a barrel today, and then tomorrow it went back down to 60, and then the prices came down in gas. Okay, there's a fluctuation there, right? If you give somebody a raise because prices went up, you think they're going to take it sitting down? That okay, now that prices went back down, I'm not going to pay you so much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's just you're at a new plateau basically, and
yes.
That's fine. You know, all prices are going to adjust up, and then we have the new condition.
Right. Well, I guess that is a good point, because if you do increase the amount of money that you're paying everybody, that's more money going into the system that they can buy the goods and services of the system, which is another point that makes it worth emphasizing. This is complicated. You can't just look and say, oh, money supply went up. Bad. Money supply went down. Good. It's more it's just more complicated than that. Same thing with the interest rates. Oh, speaking of interest rates, that'll save it. The interest rates went up, Nima. We're good.
Well, yeah, so the interest rates
done anytime now.
Interest rates going up is actually starting to show up in a lot of people's bank accounts now, because, you know, if for every loan there's a deposit, and when interest rates goes up, the net subsidy to the private sector paid by the government bank goes up. So if anything, you're adding more inflation potential there. It might not, you know, people might just hold on and save the money, but to the extent that they don't, to the extent that it becomes like a really nice little cash cow, people will start spending money because the interest rates are higher. So that's something also you discussed you brought up on the call with on the town hall. It was I think it was very well argued by you.
Thank you. I approached that introduction to MMT completely differently from however I'd done it before. Did you like how I opened it? I tried to think of the most incendiary comments I could think of.
Well, you have a different way of talking about this that I don't agree with. I don't do, because you always had, but maybe it worked fine, you know, but you always give all these qualifiers and all these excuses and all these apologies beforehand. And I just, you know, too much time for, well, it's just, to me, it's just too much time spent on overhead, and I just rather just get into it.
Yeah.
So it's different approaches.
I like priming the emotional.
Right.
First.
Right.
But
that's fine.
A couple of points out of there. I did have one person at least challenge me somewhat vociferously, and one of the things was on whether or not the Federal Reserve is private or public, right? And then, I mean, if you listen to Peace Revolution podcast, I mean, there's a lot of G. Edward Griffin stuff. Oh yeah, here's the people dying. For some unknown reason, young people dying for some unknown reason in massive... he's got a list of every single person?
But this was at one point a snapshot. But athletes specifically, athletes.
Yeah.
But also the people are dying are all people who got the COVID jab, coincidentally. Right. It's got nothing to do with... I mean, it's obviously all just... Stuff just happens suddenly.
Right.
And they all took the COVID jab, and it's also
it's just sudden adult death syndrome now.
Right. It's just shit happens. We should really not try to sleuth for these incredibly arcane and hidden causes that we'll never know, because, you know, shit just happens. It started happening when they started taking the COVID jab, but
that's irrelevant.
What does that mean?
Up to 250. When did he write this article?
It's it's an arbitrary marker to focus on. Yeah, all the way through December 21, he's, you know.
Oh, this is
I mean,
this is through December 21, and he's got almost 300. Yeah, I wonder how big that list is now.
Anyway, you were talking about something else.
Yeah, I'll talk about whether or not the Federal Reserve was private. So,
yeah, right.
Now, I do want to say, so because I grew up, in quotes, with Peace Revolution podcasts, there's a lot of G. Edward Griffin, the Creature from Jekyll Island material within those podcasts. So I grew up thinking, in quotes, philosophically, we'll say it that way, economically, thinking that the Federal Reserve was a private institution. But after, what's the word I want? Interacting with Nima, coming into contact with Nima, and I learned
after enlightenment.
After enlightenment from Nima, unquestionable enlightenment from Nima. You know, here's a really good question, and I posed it to the guy at the Grand Theft World Town Hall, which is, what's the evidence that it's private? Where is it? And his response was, well, I can't tell you because the people who own it are secret. And I'm like, well, I can tell you the people who own it, and it's not secret at all. Not own it, but
that's,
who the members are is what I meant to say. Excuse me.
That's a very strange argument to make. Like, I can't tell you because it's secret. Well,
I mean, if we
how do you know it then? How do you know that it's private if it's all a secret that we can't know? I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, I guess if you look at the Federal Reserve Act, it talks about members, and then you can say, okay, there's members here, and typically members have to do with ownership. In typical is the important word there, corporate language, right? But if you continue reading the Federal Reserve Act, it tells you who the members are. It's every fucking bank in the country. In order to be a bank in the United States, you have to be a member of the Federal Reserve, and that membership doesn't give you any ownership over it. It's all intricate legal stuff wrapped in corporate language, right? And I was really confused because I brought this up, and you brought this up to me, Nima, is what does the Federal Reserve do with 98% of its profits?
Returns them to the Treasury.
Returns it to the Federal Treasury, something that a private institution owned by secret members would totally do. They would totally do that. And And the remaining 2% does go out to the members. So basically, as a bank in the United States, you must become a member of the Federal Reserve, and you get a subsidy for doing that every year or quarter or whenever they send that money out. So 2% of the profit that the Federal Reserve gets split up between all the member banks, which is all the banks in the United States. Right? And Tony kept talking about the tax status of the Federal Reserve, and I was unfamiliar what he was talking about. But if it's property taxes, then I again, show me the evidence that the Federal Reserve pays property taxes, because I wasn't able to find it.
Right.
You
seems like they
pull up the property records.
Yeah. It seems like that was, if I remember correctly, you had determined that they don't pay property taxes. Yeah, well, I mean,
what I did, and honestly, this is cursory, but I still think it's a pretty important point, is who property taxes and who pays them is public record everywhere, right? If I go to Nima's house, I can look up the property taxes, how much they are, and then I can do a public records request and say who paid the property taxes last time, and they have to send it to me, right? So I went and looked up the address for the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C., because there's a Washington, D.C. parcel search website. You can go look up property taxes and stuff in Washington, D.C., and when you type in the Federal Reserve address, nothing comes up.
It would be interesting to look at also the New York Fed and the Minneapolis Fed.
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't look at all of them, but I did go. I think I looked for one in Washington. I found another one in like the middle of the country or somewhere. All of them, nothing.
Okay. Well, and I think these are all very nice and esoteric discussions.
But at the end of the day, what's the actual function, right?
Right. What's the point of this whole? Is it public or private? It's a big topic. For everyone has their own little issues, but for a lot of the Austrians, it's the fact they're increasing the money supply, and that's bad, and that's
and they're not. They don't. They don't. Well, let me say it this way: they don't increase the money supply if you understand the money supply from a what's a good term I want
for all practical purposes.
From a practical standpoint, they do not.
And
because if you say reserves are money and treasury bonds are not, yes, they increase the money supply. When you recognize that they're both money and they're just moving these numbers back and forth, then they're just moving numbers back and forth between savings and checking accounts. Yeah. You look like you're thinking something.
Well, I was just trying to think. So the main points, which is on the one hand, what you brought up, the entire profit is basically sent to the treasury.
I think that's the biggest point. That's the biggest
which private corporation does it? Well, nobody does it. And also the board of governors, the majority of the people in the board of governors are elected by politicians. They're elected, I believe, by the Senate. Or appointed by the president and then confirmed by the Senate or something like that. I mean, a very large chunk. There's also a portion that gets elected by the Federal Reserve banks themselves, who in turn, of course, like are owned by these private banks. So they get a say in what happens, but they're not the only ones who get a say in it. There's politics involved as well. There's a president appointing, this Senate confirming. And these people, they make pretty important decisions. They make, actually, the biggest thing that the news media, everyone always looks at is interest rates. And yes, they do set the short-term interest rates, and that has an impact on people's valuation of assets. So from that standpoint, that's practical. I can use that, and it helps me make better decisions, make predictions about the financial aspects of the economy and financial assets and how they're affected by that. Also, what's not discussed so much, where they also they exercise powers with setting lending standards. And
that's interesting. Talk more about that.
Well, the Federal Reserve is supposed to monitor the individual banks, and the banks get dissolved if they don't manage.
I didn't realize it was the Federal Reserve that had the authority, that was in charge of doing that.
They do. So, I think so. They have a say in the lending standards of the individual member banks.
Okay.
That can. Of course, there's probably also obviously there was at one point this Community Reinvestment Act that was passed by Congress, and then that was also binding on the banks somehow. But certainly the Federal Reserve has some say in regards to.
Well, and then to the point, whoever does it, it's someone from the government has the ability to dissolve a bank if they're not following the rules.
Right.
I think that I don't think people understand the gravity of that, and why when we say the private sector banking system is kind of sort of not really private. Even though, we would, Nima and I could start a bank in the similar way that we would go start any other business, but we become so much government at that point because the government comes in and says, okay, you got to make this many loans on auto, this many loans on homes, this many loans on percentage of loans on this many loans percentage on that, and if you get out of whack and you don't loan to a certain number of minorities or whatever, we shut you down. And basically, the government is extending the license of being able to create money to these, in quotes, private banks, but the number of regulations that they have to follow, just in terms of who they're allowed to extend that money to, is very, very strict.
Right. I mean, they're giving people the privilege of being a member of this banking
money production
system.
Class. Yeah.
Money. You can exchange reserves at par. Your accounts, your deposits are guaranteed by the taxpayer, by the public sector. So it's a public-private partnership on the individual bank level. We call it private banks. It's a public-private partnership, right? The deposits are publicly insured. The loans, the banks is responsible for privately. But the extent to which they can't cover deposits, there's insurance, there's FDIC coming in, et cetera, et cetera. So a very different animal from your average manufacturing company or whatever. A bank is a corporation, is a company certainly, but it's tied in with a very, very complex regulatory bureaucratic system, and you become part of the government to some extent when you're a bank. You're never really completely independent.
Well, when I was
by the way, the CIA, for example, they set up private banks and then just make loans to fund CIA operations. So the CIA...
That's a good idea! Shit, Nima!
Well, right. I mean,
let's go start a bank!
That's what they did with BCIS, I think. Forgot the name of the bank. BCCI, the scandal. That was like, I think, the 80s, late 70s, 80s, CIA drug running, etc. BCCI, I think... forgot what it stands for, but yeah, they were pretty big involved there. And
so if we start our own bank, we can lend to our own.
Well, if you start your own bank and you are with the CIA and you go to the bank regulator and say, "Hey, we're with the CIA. We're going to do whatever because we're working on some operation that you don't want to interfere with," who knows what they can do?
Yeah,
who knows how much they can get away with? But yes, what they've done is they've made loans to CIA front operations. Right now, you don't need Congress money. Now you don't need approval in the Senate or whatever. You make loans, and then the bank was dissolved and went bankrupt. And the taxpayer would basically pay out on the deposits that they were on the hook for through the FDIC. Yeah, that's absolutely something they've done, and something that's the Austrians who care so much about the banks being corrupt and creating money out of nowhere, I've never really heard them much talk about this kind of angle.
There's a lot of angles we haven't heard them talk about. I wanted to say one more thing about the Federal Reserve being private or not, which is the fact that it's created by an act of Congress.
All right.
And what it is defined by the language within that act. How many other private businesses do you know were created by an act of Congress?
Yeah, but the banks they have shares in it, so it's all.
Oh
private.
Yeah, that's right. They have membership in it, and that's the end of it. Okay, you were going to bring something else up.
Well, I mean, I could just go into some notes that I took from the call.
Oh, from the Grand Theft World.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it.
So at one point, you were challenged about. So if taxes go away, then would the money completely lose its value?
And I said yes.
And you said yes, and I would say, okay, first of all, if taxes go away,
it would probably have some momentum first.
If taxes go away, there's still fines that are billed in this unit of account. There's still import fees that are billed in this money. That's in fact how the government used to fund itself early on.
So I'm glad. Hold on. I'm glad you brought this up. When he said taxes, I was including all of that in my mind.
Yeah.
But this is an important distinction to make.
Right. So if all these things go away, the government doesn't charge anything to anyone anymore, then we still have the fact that we have a banking system, that people owe money to the banks, the government banks, the government banking system, if you remember, we just said it. So because the system is so far along, you have a system with bank loans that are enforced by the state.
That's interesting.
So even if all taxes went away, you would still have a banking system that's enforced through the loans are enforced through punishment by the state.
Right, you can get sued. Yeah.
Right, so even then you still have a drain on the money. So that's one way to look at it.
You still have a demand for the money. You still have a demand.
You still have a demand for the money, for the interest, and to repay the loans at the end of the day.
Well,
so
that's a very interesting avenue to walk down. So I wonder if there would still be some level of momentum where even if well, let's say all taxes and fees and fines and tariffs and all that stuff disappeared tomorrow, and we still had the banking system carrying that momentum, at some point, would we start utilizing something else? Right? Because I think one of the things about taxes is that it really makes it difficult to use something else. I mean, let's take Bitcoin, for example, or crypto anything. Bitcoin's easier to talk about because that was the first one, and it still continues to be the big one. Is that I remember when people first started conceptualizing what might happen with Bitcoin, they were like, "Oh my God, we can transact with each other, and we don't have to pay taxes anymore." And the government was like, "Yeah."
Well, it all depends on how you handle it, right? If you're a party of two who transacts privately in secret, and you don't want to report the crypto earnings as revenue, it certainly makes it easier to do that. However, if you end up selling crypto at a profit and you get fiat back into your account, then you're always going to be scrutinized by the state.
Well,
and
you are, and then I mean, even the whole secret thing. You and I can do that with cash, with normal money, right? Or we could do it with a barter exchange or something.
Yes.
The point being is that when we have this entire tax structure and we say, okay, let's introduce a new currency to get around the currency of the state goes, oh yeah, we're in control of that too. We can make laws that apply to that too, and you still owe us taxes in dollars. If you transact in Bitcoin, you still owe us taxes in dollars, and that we you know, as you're trading, you need to basically do a like-for-like tax assessment for each time you make these trades, because that's the way that the laws work, and we're going to treat it like stocks and blah, blah, blah. You know, the point being is that tax structure there makes it more difficult for us to introduce another system. I'm wondering if that tax structure were to be removed, we still keep the banking system, and all the crypto people can go, okay, there's nobody fucking with us now. Let's just go crazy.
Well, I mean, also, I guess technically, you are kind of getting into. So if we stop paying all taxes, then are we not in an anarcho-capitalist system for all practical purposes? Because now there's no agency of taxes anymore. There's no government to some extent, you could say. But there's some kind of entity that still has control somehow, and it still can pull levers of control in one way or another. Now the main focus is the banking system. That's the only way money gets injected into the system and out of the system. Now, do they still deficit spend? Do they still have fiscal room to do deficit spending without causing major inflation, since they're not taxing anything? Right. So the taxes going away limits their ability to spend without it hitting the consumer's wallet, without it starting to cause noticeable inflation.
Right.
Right. So,
well,
to some extent, we are coming close.
Sorry, just stepping back, I want to agree with the point that you made, which is, you know, I said I think that the dollar would lose value, but you pointed out this other thing, that even without the taxes, there's, through the banking system, there's still a demand to pay your loan back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
Right. So that would still be there. So, but yeah, it's a good point that he brings up. And if there was no banking system, if it was a super primitive economy like the one we explained, where it starts with the state spending money into existence, and no banking system exists yet, then, and actually that has happened. There have been some hyperinflations historically that were caused by the state's inability to collect. I think there was one in the U.S.
There's two in the U.S.
Two in the U.S.
One technically wasn't the U.S. anymore. It was the Confederate States of America. Yeah.
Well, the Continental Dollar, I think.
So
was
yeah,
one
there was the Revolutionary Continental Dollar, and my understanding on that one, there was three big things that hit it. First of all, like you just said, there was no reasonable taxing authority. Second is it was in the middle of a war, So obviously productive capacity was a little bit stinted when everybody's changing sides and killing one another. Yeah. And the third, and this is a big one that I read from Steven Zarlinga's book, The Lost Science of Money, that the British had a counterfeit operation going off, like off the shore of Boston or off the shore of New York in a boat. So they were just printing them off like crazy. So there was an active counterfeiting operation going on in order to devalue these things. So that had three things going against it. And to the point that you just made, where, okay, with the U.S. dollar right now, there's a lot of, like, it's entrenched. We've all been using it for 250 years, right?
Right.
Whereas with the Continental, they just introduced it in this brand new country that's in active rebellion, and everybody's like, are these people going to make it?
Right. No.
Right. And the second one was the Confederate States of America. And my understanding, my cursory understanding of this, is that because the federal government was so weak, they couldn't enforce the taxes, and it was also in active war state. The production was obviously down. All the men were off fighting, and everything was getting destroyed because the armies were marching in, and all that sort of stuff. I don't know anything about an active counterfeiting operation, but yeah, no taxing authority.
Well, yeah. So history. There is good evidence for good historical evidence for MMT, for MMT's origin story throughout history. Right. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that the story panned out exactly that way. That there's a general who imposes a tax and now he needs money. In some cases, there may have already been a banking system, merchant-run banking system, co-opted by the state to some extent. The Islamic banking system, according to Graeber, was merchant-run. Yeah, was more privately run. So it's not always perfect. It does go back to the credit theory of money, right? Because you can have a merchant banker who's not the state, but who's constantly got money coming in, going out, who can operate as a bank technically, because he just has this inflow of money, so it's always money available to make available to other people in the form of loans, etc. Mm-hmm. So there's different ways to set up a banking system, and it's not always a perfect origin story, but I think it's a very good tool to understand today's banking system. And by the way, it also seems to check out, like, whenever there's a prediction that we make based on what goes on, I think the MMT approach has a pretty good track record of helping you understand the mechanics behind the system, that making better predictions from that.
Well, I also, going back to the historical evidence for supporting MMT, something I want to look more into is the story of Alexander Hamilton. He usually gets thrown under the bus, particularly in Austrian circles, because he was, the anti-Jefferson who lost the duel, and is pretty much responsible for the creation of the federal government, or at least various institutions within the federal government.
Right.
And he was the one who was like, we need to have a national debt, and everybody now is like, oh my God, that's such a horrible thing. Why would anybody be so stupid as to want a national debt, right? But again, I've used this like the fourth time I've used this word so far in the show. My cursory understanding of Alexander Hamilton is he took a look at the situation, because the war was just over, and all these different forms of war bonds and continentals and different types of money and different stuff going to all these different countries was just flying around, and there was this big argument going over, should we honor the financial promises or debts that we made at all? Should we honor them 100%? Should we honor these countries but not those countries? Should we offer 50% for this country and 75%? There was this huge conversation of what to do with all this money. And Alexander Hamilton, or not money but debt, Alexander Hamilton came along and said, accept them all at par. All of them. And his reasoning behind that was, again, my minimal amount of information here, was that as soon as he did that, all that stuff that had been created during the war is now a circulating currency. Did that make sense? Did you follow me on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he knew that okay, if we don't accept the stuff at par, the entire nation is going to lose its credit on the entire world stage. So let's accept it all at par. We now have credit moving forward because we'll accept all the debts that or we'll make good on all the debts that we offered. And because we make good, that piece of paper that somebody had that got printed is now valuable. It can be traded.
Yeah. The question is, what does it mean if you have different units, different currencies? What does at par even mean?
No, I didn't mean to say different currencies. I mean to say like different, like, okay, we paid war bonds to the soldiers, and we offered bonds to the Netherlands, or we offered bonds to I don't know the specifics of where all these things were offered out, but there was all these different financial arrangements that got put into place, and I'm sure part of the argument was, well, we gave money to that country, but they didn't end up helping us, so we shouldn't pay back our bonds, or stuff like that, right? There was this huge quagmire of what to do with all these different financial instruments that had been created, and Alexander Hamilton was the one that said, accept them all. Yeah. And he got into power, and he accepted them all. And, Alexander Hamilton, this is a big one, the Whiskey Rebellion. Alexander Hamilton was the guy who was responsible for putting the tax on whiskey somewhere in like Pennsylvania or wherever the hell it was for rednecks out in the middle of nowhere, which my understanding was it was an incredibly tiny amount of tax. But so was the tax on tea, right? Which wasn't the thing that started the war, but it was kind of the spark they got things going, right? And the Whiskey Rebellion, they rebelled and said, no, we shouldn't have to pay this tax. And so George Washington, the hero, marches into wherever the hell it was. I said Pennsylvania, I'm not sure. And there wasn't any fighting, because once everybody saw the army, they went, we'll pay the tax. Alexander Hamilton was thrilled at this. And from an MMT perspective, I could totally understand why. He needed that tax to make his money valuable. Why else would he care so much about getting some whiskey tax from some moonshiners out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, yeah, it's if you tax something that's in universal demand, especially, that's more powerful, right? That's what creates demand for that token.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. What was the next on your list?
So, okay, big picture point. Just we went off on a tangent, but yeah, if all taxes went away, banking system still in place. If not, then we've seen in history that the money that is when we see hyperinflation. In fact, when there's no capacity to enforce the taxation regime. Another thing that came up was, okay, why are the reserves needed? And you never really went into the details. That reserves are needed.
I needed you there for that.
Well, because you said the taxes, and then they were talking about...
If I remember correctly, tax payments are made in reserves from the banks, right? From the banking system.
Yeah, but it's the account holders who are taxes, because they started talking about the banks they have to pay taxes, and that's why the money has value. But no, first of all, reserves are needed to facilitate individual tax payments, interbank check clearing, and cash withdrawals. So those are the three events when reserves are needed. Mm-hmm. Okay, the bank needs to present reserves, have reserves, to request cash from the central bank to make ATM payouts. Or if one bank, so if we're both at Bank of America, and I write you a Bank of America check, you deposit it, then the bank doesn't need reserves.
They just move numbers around on their own ledger.
Right, but if you pay someone at Wells Fargo, you write a check to someone at Wells Fargo, they deposit your B of A check, then Wells Fargo will go to B of A and request the equivalent amount in reserves. So that's what reserves are needed for these events: interbank check clearing, cash withdrawals, and tax payments made by individuals. Right. That's correct. Like you said, anytime somebody makes a tax payment, their reserve account is debited. And the
bank's reserve account is debited, correct?
Bank's reserve account is debited, and then the money just disappears from the private sector for all practical purposes. It's just deleted from the private sector system. And okay, so this typical response that we see on occasion, but if somebody says, I don't need money because I want to pay taxes, I just need it because somebody else finds it valuable. Right. So that's an argument against the theory that taxation is the root drain on, or basically the root cause of the valuation. This one lady was saying, no, I just need it because somebody else is going to accept it.
Right. Well, somebody else accepts it because it's taxed.
Well, and right, we're talking about systemic, right? We're talking about the systemic reason and not your own personal reason for why you happen to accept Bitcoin or dollars in your account.
Well,
in your
Bob Murphy actually said this to me in the debate that I had
too,
with him on the Tom Woods show, which I thought was the stupidest thing.
Right,
it was so stupid that he said this.
I understand that not everyone, but if you go back to why does a corporation accept the money? Well, because they need to pay taxes. All the corporations that get paid at the end of the day, they need to pay taxes on their profits and on their income in U.S. dollars and on the payroll and on.
I want to bring about up exactly what Bob said, Bob Murphy said, because I think it does help elucidate the thing that the point that you're bringing up. Is he said that, Dylan, when you were young, I don't believe that you saved money because you had to fill out a tax return because you weren't filling out a tax return. Well, that's true. I wasn't filling out a tax return, say, when I was 12. However, when I went to the store and I bought something, there was sales tax on that, and that there were the money that the corporation and I mean, let's go back to what you just said. The money that corporation got, next payroll period, they had to pay payroll taxes.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then when the people got the money that they got paid at the end of the year, they had to file a tax return.
Right. The vast majority. The whole point is just that a significant majority of individuals have to pay this fee in this unit of account to this entity from time to time. That's enough. Doesn't mean everyone understands it even. Doesn't mean everyone does it. Everyone has a demand for that purpose. But a sufficient majority of people need to make this payment. Probably it's the most universal payment, the most universal service that people pay for in any given country, right? Yep. The tax payment. We all have to do it.
Well, and I think it's also worth pointing out. I've used it for momentum a couple times here. Is that if we compare the beginning of the country to where they had a problem getting people to accept continentals because they weren't worth anything, versus now, well, at the beginning of the country, there's no system set up where people accept these things. Now we've got 250 years of a system set up where people accept these things, right? Right. So yes, there is a cultural aspect of this, or a social aspect of this, where it's like, okay, we all recognize that this money, does X, so we're going to keep going through those motions because I've used it my whole life and I'm familiar with it. Absolutely. But again, going back to the system, how did we come to that point to begin with? Through taxation. Right.
Taxation is the best way to start the origin story. And then, of course, if you have the power to do that, then you can also make loans, and then you can demand the loan repayment and enforce that. And then you have this whole banking system on top of the public finance system. That's how we have a monetary economy, basically.
Yes.
So, and then the same with Bitcoin, right? So I think you explained it very well how we...
Yeah, and I didn't want to because it totally went off on a tangent that I knew that they were going to go off on.
I think it's great because crypto is a big topic, and especially a big topic amongst sort of Austrian-minded, independent, news-minded people. So you made the point that similarly with Bitcoin, the miners, they inject Bitcoin into the private sector economy, and they ask for a payment in Bitcoin if you want to get access to the blockchain, if you want to facilitate a transaction. You brought up the point about you think it's a prototype because it's
circular.
circular, which I
We've
don't
had this
think it
conversation
is.
before. I know.
We had this conversation before. But also, I think you bring this up on occasions because it's not easy to understand. That's why it's a prototype, because it's that doesn't hit home for most people. The fact that you pay for a permanent, immutable, decentralized entry in a blockchain, the biggest, most secure blockchain.
It's too abstract.
It's too abstract, but there's nothing I can do about that. It's nothing we can. It is an abstract topic, but it is very relevant. It's very important, I think. And all the other, like when you bring up Steemit and whatever, the services where you actually you
can see it more clearly.
Use a cryptocurrency, you get a more tangible service and response, are a very poor substitute for understanding the blockchain, the decentralized Bitcoin blockchain value, because those all involve a third-party liability, human interaction. On Steemit, it involves, there has to be a Steemit blog and a server and a staff that honors your Steemit points or whatever.
Right.
You can get, you can upvote an article. This is all third-party interaction, all third-party liability, which is a weakness. It's a step back from where cryptocurrency has come, which is, it's all cryptography. There's no third-party liability. You can publicly view the source code of the Bitcoin protocol and see how the Bitcoin blockchain functions and make a payment. If you make that payment, you will get access to the blockchain. There's no human interaction. It's all autopilot, all automatic. The human interaction is the miner running the software, but
yeah, but I think at this point now we're having a discussion of which crypto is better. I bring up Steemit not because it functions better or worse than any other crypto, but because like you just said, the service is more visible.
But in these cases where the service is more visible, it's actually, it always ends up relying on third-party liability, which is, it's in my opinion, it's a step back.
Oh, I agree.
And,
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm focusing on a different thing.
Well, just just important to point out the fact that it's automated, there's no third-party liability, is hugely important when it comes to the
I would say this:
value of the Bitcoin token.
Imagine if the Bitcoin miners, keeping all the security features and apparatuses that they have now, instead of saying, "Hey, we'll give you access to this decentralized blockchain entry," started being able to offer insurance, right? Liability insurance, property insurance, auto insurance, business insurance, professional insurance, all these different insurances, and you had to pay your premiums in Bitcoin. I think if anybody's going to create a private currency that's going to, for real, become private, they got to start there, because insurance, if we're going to separate, the free market in the sense of the non-aggression principle. I don't mean free market in the sense that the British Empire's used it for hundreds of years, right? Versus government that has access to taxation. Obviously, taxation is kind of like cheating when you're giving value to a money supply, because I can just point a gun at you and say value it or I'll shoot you, right? But the services that taxation provides is stuff kind of like insurance. I mean, there's infrastructure. That's another one. But I mean, if you look at the court system or the welfare state or stuff like this, it's like more these fundamental boiled down services that are necessary to like keep the framework of society together. I think if a crypto starts addressing that's where I think we're going to start seeing the tension of whether or not it can make it.
But once again,
currency that people would actually adopt to use as a currency.
Yeah. But once again, you're introducing a service, insurance, that involves in most realistic cases, involves some human liability, involves some contract that you make with an insurance agency. Now, what's going to be available more and more down the road is smart contracts, where you don't have a third-party liability, other than the individual who's created the smart contract, the auditor who's gone through the smart contract and confirmed that there's no leaks, no issues, blah, blah, blah. In that case, you will have a fully automated insurance product that people will be making their insurance payments through cryptocurrency on. But I don't know how realistic it is. I do know that timestamping, like creating a timestamp machinery that generates immutable, decentralized, permanent timestamps has been going on for over 10 years and is working splendidly, and doesn't require this third-party liability thing. So it's a huge step forward. So anything that is a step forward, I think, would have to involve this elimination of third-party liability. Everything else will just be services that are running on top of, they're utilizing the system, but they're still run by humans at the end of the day, still run by companies who are seeking revenues, who have expenses, who have liabilities, who may fail, may not. So
right. And then
of course,
I definitely don't want to make it seem to. I don't want to say and make it seem like I'm suggesting that that's all that needs to happen for a private currency to take off. I don't know what needs to happen for a private currency to take off because we've never seen it before, right? Yeah, but I suspect that it will.
Well, I think Bitcoin has done a pretty decent job at it so far, all things considered.
I agree with you, but let me say it this way. Nobody right now is walking around and paying for everything in Bitcoin. And even if they are making a lot of transactions in Bitcoin, it's still being valued in whatever their unit of account is in whatever country they are.
Well, there are people walking around and paying for things in Bitcoin.
Yeah, so. But I mean, when are the things that they're paying for valued in Bitcoin, or are they valued in dollars? And then
valued in dollars.
Yeah, and then you need to pay however many Bitcoin that the Bitcoin's worth in dollars at that time.
Right. Sure. That's a function of the volatility, which is a function of the stage that we're in.
Yeah, I the stage, exactly. So my point is, once the crypto, whether it's Bitcoin or anything else, this is my argument, gets involved with what governments traditionally have provided services for, whether that's legal stuff, arbitration, building roads, title, that sort of stuff. Once it starts creeping, getting more and more of that, I think those are the services that are needed to really push this over, as opposed to, say, Steam It, which is this dorky media thing, right?
Right. So you're looking for practical applications, and that's what would happen, right? If crypto is this new private currency thing that makes everything decentralized, then you would expect to see something like what you just said as one of the practical implications of the permeation of the whole economy by such a cryptocurrency. The whole economy would have to become more decentralized, and yes, there would have to be government services would have to be made obsolete by means of utilizing.
Well, and then now that I think about it, what's the difference between a Chuck E. Cheese token and a U.S. dollar? Oh, you even know you're from Germany. Do you even know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, the Chuck E. Cheese you can only use in the Chuck E. Cheeses.
Exactly.
US dollar token.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
US dollar token you can use at Chuck E. Cheese, but also outside of Chuck E. Cheese, and in between the different Chuck E. Cheese, if you want to, have a medium to convert your token to temporarily, do that. You cash out at Chuck E. Cheese and then you cash in at the next one, I guess.
Right. So my point being is that we've talked about this before, and like the MMTers will bring this up. Anybody can make a money.
Yeah.
Who's going to accept it? And stuff like tokens, casino chips, gift cards, all this sort of stuff are perfect examples of private money, nothing to do with crypto, in action. The difference is
airline miles, also.
Whatever, right? The difference is whatever. And all these things, you only have a very limited access to what those services are, and those services aren't universally valued enough. Here's my argument: where someone would, no one's going to accept the Chuck E. Cheese token because they're like, I'm not 8, I don't care, right? No, some people won't accept Steam it because they're like, I don't care about this stupid website. If everybody's paying their insurance premiums, or everybody's paying their legal fees, or everybody's paying whatever in this token, I think we start getting back to the point where we talked about, when I was 12, did I fill out a tax return, and therefore I valued the money because I wasn't paying taxes directly with it. No, but everybody else was.
Right.
Right. I think that there has to be a tipping point where the service is so ubiquitous. Yeah. That we get closer to that.
Well, for example, the process of making a Bitcoin transaction is something that happens thousands and thousands of times daily in the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Right.
And every time there's a fee, every time there's a payment made to the Bitcoin government, the miners.
Yeah.
In order for the service of getting access to the blockchain, basically, so that is the most universally demanded service in an economy, is payments, really. So you could argue that this token is needed for one of the most basic things that happen in an economy, which is a transaction. But yeah, it's certainly, there's going to be more and more payments, more and more services, hopefully, that are on-chain or that are semi-automated, maybe some of them completely automated smart contracts, where people will make payments with a crypto token.
Side note, we had some, Tommy was in here commenting, and we missed it.
Oh, no.
15 minutes ago. He said, 87,000 more IRS agents are going to make sure you do, guys. I think he was referring back to whether or not we might be able to have a sneaky transaction without the IRS knowing. Yes, right. Good point, Tommy. And then he said with faux representation, that probably had something to do with me talking about what was going on at the beginning of the revolution. If you're still listening, Tommy, feel free to tell us what you're referring to with that. Anyway, we got sidetracked with fucking private currencies when we were trying to talk about MMT, Nima. What do we? What's the next thing that you had on the list?
Yeah, so that was one of the points, was just a comment about, well, I don't buy Bitcoins because I need to pay my fees with it, but because somebody else will accept. Yeah, but why do they? And at the end of the day, why does this whole system still exist? If I'm wrong, then one null hypothesis would be, is there a cryptocurrency without fees? A decentralized cryptocurrency without fees? Or would that be impossible to exist because the currency would lose value because there's no demand for it? Oh, I would argue the latter.
I'd argue the latter too. Although right now, again, the thing is so new, people buy it just because it's a cryptocurrency. I think there's a lot of push or pump and dump scams and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of sort of that stuff going on. But I think if you track that, I completely agree.
Well, but they all have some kind of mechanism to collect fees, even the shit coins. But yeah, if it's completely centralized, like the Facebook token or whatever they tried to introduce, yeah, they can run the whole thing and subsidize it all, and it would be a completely centralized system, and it's not a decentralized crypto system. So that was so one last thing that I just jotted down was, I guess after you dropped off the call, the conversation got so deep and so philosophical. And I think it goes back to the fact that this whole learning about this kind of approach to MMT that we've learned, it challenges the very foundations of anarcho-capitalism. Because the barter theory of money is not just the foundation for the Austrian money cycle, or for the Austrian money theory, but if I'm honest with myself, I think it's also the entire foundation of the anarcho-capitalist philosophy. because to us, because I consider myself an ANCAP as well.
I still consider myself an anarchist. I don't even know what capitalism means anymore, so I just say anarchist.
Yeah, yeah, anarchist. I think that's fine too.
Yeah.
It always starts with the individual trading with another individual, and then from there you build a bigger group in society, and then there's a bad government that takes some of it, but it doesn't seem to be empirically true that is how societies emerge. It seems to be much more that we've always been ordered around quite a bit from the top on one level or another. And I think that's why bringing up this whole topic led their later conversation towards this question. Okay, can we live without it? Can we have a society without a government? And actually Tony said, well, it's this whole DRO concept that, Free Domain Radio talked a lot about that, and the
Dispute Resolution Organization for anybody who's hearing that for the first time. Yes, but basically, how do you, if part of, just to break this down, part of the anarcho-capitalism argument is that we need to be able to replace legal services and court services, and we would do this with this private organization called the Dispute Resolution Organization. And you can look it up past that. Go ahead, Nima. Yeah.
And Tony actually, he immediately said it's going to become a government again, which is an argument that Steph has always pushed against very hard. But that's what Tony's view was. It's just you have this kind of institution. It's just going to devolve into a government at one point. And I think that maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe the government is just the institutionalized version of a DRO. Because it's this Quiglian process of we always go from instrumentalization to institutionalization. Basically, we always have useful things that turn out to just at the end of the day they drop the focus of being useful to others as per their original charter, and they start focusing on aggrandizing themselves and
the vested interests to gain power within them.
Vested interest to gain power. So
I think. And I'm going to hit a low blow on some Austrians right now. Are you ready? So when you look at the MMT perspective and you go back and you take a look at the philosophical aspect of government, that it's inherently immoral because it initiates the use of force, and it has the monopoly on the initiation of the use of force. And we turn around and we say, okay, how do we solve the situation without government? If you start with the barter theory of money, you got a way to do it. There's a clear separation. Bam, you're good. But now when you say MMT, credit theory of money, you say, well, now this is really, really complicated. And I really, really wonder if that with the anarcho-capitalist view, it gives an immature but very easy solution. Here's a solution. You don't have to achieve this big thing. There's no great fight or whatever. You just have to stop believing in government and move toward the private direction, and eventually it'll clean itself out. Right? Did I get it right or did I get it wrong with that with that description? When you say when you say credit theory of money, states came before markets, it's like, whoa, everything just got really complicated. There's no fine line in the middle before, and what this means is that hard work is going to be required, hard decisions are going to be required, you're going to have to make mistakes, and what's good and what's evil isn't clear. Mm. And I mean that. Let's talk about a transition from childhood to adulthood, if that's not it. Mm-hmm. Right? And I wonder, and I apply this equally to myself because I had a very emotional reaction when Nima first started introducing MMT to me, is that I wonder if the emotional reaction is so hard, particularly from the Austrians, is because you're taking away their easy lack of responsibility.
Well, yeah, I think, and it's always, I think it's maybe a little unfair to call it immature because most of these Austrians, myself included, they had been searching for a long time.
Immature from an emotional level, is to be clear. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, because they've been searching for a long time and been doing a lot of research, and then you end up at that point. You give yourself a justification or you justify your position based on the search that has been going on for so long, and you're very confident in the soundness of the theory that you found. At the same time, you're very relieved and happy that you found a consistent theory.
Well, and then it's easy. Again, emotionally, it's easy. Here's the good side. Here's the bad side.
Seem to be, but it doesn't seem to be, because also a lot of people were never interested in hearing about any Austrian theories of mine. So you're already within a margin. You're in a heterodox school. You're already marginalized. You've gone through a lot of research. So I'm just giving reasons for this. The degree to which a lot of these people are very convinced and very. They feel like they're very refined at that point too, you know, and to some extent maybe they are.
Philosophically, they are very refined. Philosophically, they are very refined. Yes. Yeah. No, I do want to hammer on it though, because again, I'm looking at myself, analyzing myself with this as well. When I was entrenched in the Austrian view, is that again, it's the emotional view of it. It's very, very simple because there's intellectually there's a lot of work to get there, and usually you're only attracted to it because there's a battle that's happened somewhere else, and I'm searching for something because I'm unable to figure out what to do with this battle that's going on in my head, and then you find it. But when you do find it and you have the intellectual capacity to understand it and the interest, there's a clear, very obvious line of here's good and here's bad. Yeah. And it allows you to go on the good side and say, I'm the good side, and part of the prescription is don't engage in any government activity whatsoever. Don't go to the military, don't vote, don't run for office, don't participate, none of it. It doesn't allow you to do any of it, and basically you just put on your helmet and go, okay, the Peter Schiff crash is going to happen at any time now, so I better be ready. Yeah. And I know it, and you guys don't, and I'm gonna be ready with Ron Paul memes for when it happens. That's kind of the attitude. I mean, I don't think I'm that far off, right? Right. And to come to them and say no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. They don't want to hear it.
Right. Well, yeah, and also something that maybe didn't come up during the town hall, but that I always hammer on is also the practical usefulness of all of this. How does this?
That was going through my head. That was going through my head, but I knew I couldn't argue it as well as you could.
Because I know they're very big on that too. Richard and all these people, they're very big on. They actually mentioned it once. How do you handle your investments, your 401k? How do you do that in a confident and productive manner? So yeah, I guess because it's a leap to because then we'd have to go into stock market analysis through the MMT lens and how that's been beneficial. And even there, there are people who do that, but the timing is hard to get sometimes. So you can't necessarily become super wealthy by understanding MMT, but I think you can set the right strategy, big picture, and tune out some of the noise that you're harassed with every day.
I think that's probably the strongest thing that you just said. You could tune out the noise.
Yeah.
And one of the noise is the thing that I just mentioned, which is economic Armageddon is around the corner, and so why should I plan anything big financially in my life when I know economic Armageddon is around the corner? I was like that. Right, I bet that had something to do with the fact that I went traveling as a vagabond in Europe for 4 fucking years or whatever, right? I'm like, okay, this is all going to come crashing out at any second, so why do traditional stuff to, make a living and get a family, buy houses and get a family, all that sort of stuff? Why bother with any of that when I know the whole thing's going to come crashing down? I can now see clearly through that noise, as you just said, and know that participating is worth it.
Right. Like you said, it's a little more complicated. So the ANCAP position gives you one enemy at the end of the day, right? It's the initiation of force, and everyone who's engaged in that is on the evil side. you know, the more directly you're engaged with that, the more evil, the more remote. Maybe there's some gray areas or whatever. But it pits you against your enemies very easily. And I think one thing I've learned through reading Carol Quigley's Evolution of Civilizations, and I think the 6 different spheres of power, that is a more accurate depiction.
Culture? You mean the 6
culture?
Culture,
yeah, okay. Right. So we have going from more concrete to more abstract. We have military, politics, economics, social, religious, and intellectual.
Right.
Right.
As just different ways of analyzing any given society.
Right. So basically, the desires or the emotions that you appeal to within your activity basically determines which of these spheres your organization is in. And it might sometimes be overlaps or whatever. But yeah, military is responding to physical threats, to physical safety.
Or engaging in physical threats, yes.
Right. Politics is basically interpersonal power relations are clarified and negotiated. Economics is who gets what stuff, you know, belongs to whom. Social is companionship, basically. It's personal companionship, things that you can't buy with money, that you can't really do through force. You know, there's still a desire that we have there. And then religious is basically for psychological certainty, like you said. By the way, recently the supreme leader of Iran gave a speech, and he was talking about psychological security and how fake news, and basically everyone who disagrees with this government line, but how fake news are destroying people's psychological security. You know, so.
He may not be lying.
Right. And also intellectual, which is our thirst for knowledge, our desire for knowledge. So there are different desires that you can appeal to, and that gives you power, right? So that's also why I just call it 6 spheres of power or whatever.
Okay,
but 6 spheres of influence. These are different ways in which you can be better than others as well. If you can,
you're saying, power, I'm really focused on social power. Therefore, your military power doesn't count, or something like that.
Yeah, or I can use my social power to rile up all these individuals so that they overpower your military power, for example. You know, so all these different levers of power, within these circles, within these spheres, there are different individuals pulling strings, sometimes dominating the scenery, sometimes getting outsmarted by somebody else. But it's sort of more of like an oligarchy, you know. So it's more complicated than the government is bad. It's more like you have all these spheres of power and people competing to some extent. Sometimes they get so much power that they don't have much competition. And this is basically what Edward Bernays wrote about, right? In Propaganda, the people who shape our beliefs and our behaviors are an unseen government. I think that's exactly what he's talking about. People who interfere or interact within all these different spheres. And also I wonder sometimes if ancient mythology and the gods that they've created, if they're just an anthropomorphic version of very powerful people within these different spheres. You know, like I just started watching this. I just finished actually one season of The Sandman on Netflix, and there's the Lord of Dreams. He goes into people's dreams and controls their dreams. And yeah, in this show, he's depicted as like some divine figure, and it's all very childish. I mean, I like the show, but it's childish. But in reality, it's probably more like somebody like an Edward Bernays. Could literally be the Lord of Dreams, right? Yeah. He gets us to think about things that then appear in our dreams. To what extent does he calculate, or does he know that what will be in our dreams or whatever, and how they'll have an impact on us? I don't know, but I'm very certain there are people who are studying this stuff day and night and who are all over the idea of dominating people through their thoughts and their dreams and all of that. So when they talk about these mystical figures, oftentimes I think they're just anthropomorphic versions of people who really do this kind of stuff.
Interesting point. Yeah. I wanted to make one more criticism of the anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah, it's beat up on it.
I've heard this from Stefan Molyneux quite a few times, and I actually challenged him on it, but I don't think he understood that I was challenging him on it, and we ended up moving on to another part of the conversation. I think that was your and I first conversation with him. But there's this argument that what would a free society do if it was up against a non-free society? And the argument is that the non-free society would have no reason to attack because there's no tax structure to conquer. And it takes 5 minutes of looking at history to know that's complete bullshit. I mean, what about Manifest Destiny in the United States? Was everybody moving west in order to tap into the natives' tax structure? Right? What about the Mongols, who like annihilated something like 90% of the people that they came into contact with? I mean, I remember listening to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History on the history of the Mongols, that when they attacked Baghdad, they leveled it so completely, like to the ground, filled in the irrigation that had been built over like hundreds and hundreds of centuries, killed every single thing and just left it nothing and moved on, to the point where when they I think it was like 1200 or something that they raised Baghdad, it didn't get the same population level it had before it was attacked until 1950. Like, that's how completely they fucking demolished Baghdad, right? So, are you telling me that the Mongols, if they bumped into a free society, would be like, I guess there's no tax structure to take it, well, we'll just leave them alone? No, there's crazy fucking people that will come and kill you, whether or not there's a tax structure there.
For sure. And also, once again, this is a typical ANCAP perspective, is that, well, all you need for power is a tax structure, right? You take over the tax structure, and you're the
king.
New dominant. Yeah. You're the new dominant power. You're the evil, and there's only one evil, and that's the government. That's it. But if we once again you look at it through the 6 spheres of culture that Quigley observes, there have been. Yeah, that's one of the options. Military. There have been civilizations such as the Phoenicians, for example, who were very keen on taking over people's trade, the trade of what was going on in the country, and they would set up. They would take charge of import-export operations. And they would set up a customs department. That's apparently where the word customs comes from, because they could analyze the desires and the customs and behaviors of the society just by being inside that department that's in charge of export and imports and all of that stuff. And then they start giving people stuff that they wanted, and with that, they control the monetary system, and slowly over time, over a long period of time, take charge of significant aspects of the civilization. There's people who've done it through intellectual, religious infiltration.
Sumeria is an example of the religious, right? At least before the kings took control. I mean, I don't know how accurate the story that he tells in the Evolution of Civilizations is, and I wonder how. Because I mean, the book was written in the '60s. I don't know if modern archaeology has pulled up something different, but basically he tells a story that the priest class in ancient Sumeria got control, or got the knowledge of when the floods would come for the Tigris and the Euphrates, and by watching the stars, right? And they didn't tell the populace. They just said, "Oh, we're in communication with the gods, and therefore we can predict it. And you need to give us tribute so we can continue being in communication with the gods, so we can tell you when the floods are going to happen." Well, that was the beginning of the power structure.
Yeah.
They didn't need an army. I mean, they needed one later, but
there's an information disequilibrium, if you will, and people will take advantage of that everywhere and for eternity, you know. And also another thing that I think they started talking about in the town hall at one point, just this human desire of dominate, of being better than others. Mm-hmm. It's just something that we all, or being over.
You want to go higher up. You want to go higher up in the hierarchy.
You want to go higher up, yeah. So you identify yourself by your relative situation compared to everyone else, you know. So to a lot of people, it's more important that they are better off than everyone else around them than everyone having a bunch of stuff.
Right. Meaning I'll put you down in order to make it look like I'm going up. Yeah, exactly.
That's austerity, by the way. That's taxation. That's when the financial overlords flex their muscles. When, okay, you've made some good money now, but you also have some big debts. We're going to deflate your assets now. Mm-hmm. So you need our money again. So you're short on stuff again. So you have, so you're in want and not in abundance. It's what they do
over and over again. Over and over. Cycle.
They do that when people get too prosperous, when people have too much money compared to the bureaucrat class.
I want to emphasize this now philosophically and practically. I want to meld the two. So going back to the anarchist thought, I'm going to even leave out the word capitalism, right? So my understanding of the anarchist thought, it's based on two principles, which is the non-aggression principle. It's not moral to initiate force. And two, the self-defensive principle, which is if somebody initiates force onto you, it is moral to defend yourself, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any argument against that at all.
Right.
Right? And then they go on and they make the observation that, okay, government has the monopoly on the initiation of the use of force, therefore by definition they're immoral if we look at these two principles. Again, I don't have any argument with that. But this all gets muddy and complicated because if we go back to what I just said about, okay, is a non-free society going to invade a free society? Absolutely yes. I mean, just think of like, okay, let's say the United States goes completely ANCAP tomorrow. You don't think China and Russia are going to be like, and just move right in?
Well, in the U.S., you have this situation of like 3 to 4 firearms per individual. So given that, I still would doubt that any of those guys would really do that.
I think you still see my point, which is to say that there are external problems that you need a coherent state, for the lack of a better word, to deal with. And when we say, okay, well then does that mean that we throw out the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle? I would say no. Here's where my philosophy meets practicality, now that an MMT was a big part of me getting here, which is to say you got to look at the situation that you're in, right? Because I think a lot of the ANCAP and even libertarian side of things, which is to say, does your decision create anarchistic utopia? No, then it's bad, right? That's kind of the attitude they come toward it, which I'm saying you got to look at what's the current situation. Using the tools that you have at hand, how do you better exemplify the non-aggression principle? How do you better exemplify the self-defense principle? And then going back to spending from the government. Again, the Austrian version is just tell them to stop existing and go away and everything will be better. Stop spending everything and put all the taxes down. And we know, okay, that's going to, I mean, not the taxes down, but if you stop spending anything, that's going to create austerity, right? Which is going to kill a lot of people and then have no solution to anything. So if we say, okay, we understand that we have this monetary system, that we have this thing called government, how do we, keeping in mind that our goal is non-aggression and self-defense, because I also understand the argument that, like, okay, if you get inside of it, now you're part of the problem, ha! And you can never, you can't put out fire with more fire. Yeah, okay, I get all that. But I would say that the self-defense principle suggests that I should get involved with it in order to slow it down. Right? They say, okay, you shouldn't vote because that's the aggression against others. No, I'm voting because it's self-defense.
Yeah. No.
So, again, I would argue that the difference is a maturity level. Because with my description that I just said, you need to be willing to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I can't just say, okay, here's clear good, here's clear bad. I'm just going to stay on this side and I'm good. I don't have that option anymore. There's work and there's mistakes to be made, and if you want to get anywhere, you got to make them, but you got to participate in order to get anywhere. And I think MMT was a big part of me getting to that understanding. We're just nodding at each other now. I was waiting for something to come back.
MMT basically showed you that this is all more complicated.
Yeah, this is all definitely that this is all more complicated.
And actually, and also beyond MMT, we talked about this recently. I think we're never going to get a blank slate. It's never happened before. Never going to happen in the future. You're always working with the cards you're dealt, and the question is more like how do you flow with? It's like a wave, right? It's like a electrical wave almost. How do you flow with the process and take charge of it? Maybe take ownership of the whole flow and direct it to some better place.
I think that's well put, and I think we've been going for a while. So I think
I was just wondering.
I think we should wrap it up. Yeah. So this has been Dylan Moore and Nima Major with Irita TV. Check us out right here. And then our mutual friend said I should also remind everybody that we are also on Spotify. You can check us out on Spotify, on Rumble, on Telegram, on BitChute, on Gab, on Twitter, on Facebook, not on YouTube because we've been banned because we've issued too much wrong speak on the COVID vaccine. But go ahead and head over to irita.tv to check us out and find us at the social media of your choice. I hope you've enjoyed watching. I've been enjoying talking to Nima. I think he's been enjoying talking back. And we thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.